Hey, we're listening to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I'm your co-host Andy,
And I'm your co-host Josh.
and today we're joined by Paige-Troxell, the director of Fredheads-the-documentary.
Hi,
Oh,
thank you so much for having me.
our pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for being here. As you guys heard on our last episode, Mark is taking a little bit of a hiatus while he's focusing on some personal things. So wish him the best of luck. But full steam forward with my main man Andy. He has been a guest in the past. I'm super excited to be going on this journey with him over the next month or so. Well, time will tell. Because
Yeah.
Andy's also getting married next month.
Yeah. So I also have my own personal stuff coming up, but happy to be the temporary co-host for now. Huge fan and happy to give Mark some time for mental health, as is the theme of the show.
Yeah, we take mental health seriously, and there is no one that I would rather have on this kicking off our Saturday portion of Horrific Hope 2023, the film festival which we host. Uh, Paige is the director and creator behind the documentary Fred Heads, which takes a look at the fandom of Freddy-Krueger and Nightmare on Elm Street, but also the mental health ties to it. And uh, again, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm really excited for an audience to see this again. It was so much fun on our first showing, and ever since then I've been like, okay, I'm like dying to do it. And then I feel like your festival is like the perfect opportunity for us because our documentary speaks so much to mental health and horror. So it just like co-aligned, and I know our team is really excited. Some of them are flying in to come see it, and so we hope to see everyone there.
I am so excited to for an audience to experience this. I've seen this film a couple of times now, and I feel like every time I get it, like these are like first half of this documentary is like conversations that I have at conventions with people, and it's like, oh, why did you get into this, or why do you love Jason, or why does this slasher icon, and Freddy's really interesting to look at. And I love the exploration of the fandom, but I love the back half even more because I remember the first time I watched this movie and I was like not expecting to like get choked up in like certain portions of this film. And I was just like this credits started rolling. I was like, well, dang, it was not expecting any of this.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
I gotta say, I when I watched it, I was expecting, I've watched a lot of documentaries on franchises, and I thought it would be kind of just like an analytical look through the series, but instead it was very emotional. And honestly, by the end, I kind of fell in love with like you and your group of friends a little bit. Like, and I was just like similar to watching one of these slasher movies with a group of friends. You guys kept that kind of dynamic in a real life documentary, and yeah, I was not expecting that either.
Thank you. I love hearing this.
It's such an interesting format because like so much is going on outside of this conversation between you guys and the five. When you guys were trying to figure out how to format this documentary, why did you guys decide to kind of anchor it as this conversational piece?
Yeah, for sure. So when we first started getting submissions, the first thing that we did was we opened submissions worldwide, and we had like a list of 12 questions that we were asking people. And so we started getting a lot of the submissions in, and Kim Gunzinger, who's my co-producer and co-director for the documentary, we were looking at all the footage and we hadn't really gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, but we started realizing some generalized themes of things. And we're like, how are we going to tie this together? How are we going to bring in these submissions? How are we going to do this? And we always knew that our core group of friends, we wanted like our stories to be told because that's the whole reason why we made the documentary. We were like, all right, we want to tell these stories of this community, but like the five of us have such a great story. And so we're like, why don't we just set it at a dinner table? Like, why don't we just do like a round table and set it where it's all of us and then the camera is angled down the middle, like you're sitting at the table with us. Because how we had the fans submit their footage, we had them talk on camera instead of off camera. And if people don't know what on camera versus off camera is in the film industry, this is on camera where you're staring into the lens. And then off camera is where you're talking to a producer off camera. And we wanted them to be telling their story like a diary. Like we're letting the world in on something that we know, a secret that we know. And it's a diary, it's a journal. And so we thought, what better way for the audience to be sitting at the table with us? Like they're sitting at the round table, they're hanging out with us. So it feels very much like friendom. And we filmed it probably 4 times, I think, that dinner scene. We filmed it at like a convention after we were super exhausted and it just didn't feel right. Nobody told their story the right way. I wasn't as open with my story. Anthony wasn't as open with his story. It just was kind of like, okay, let's do this. So then we planned another dinner, and there were then too many people there. We had a bunch of people there, and we have some of that B-roll. We tried to honor those dinner scenes by putting some of the B-roll in our documentary. And we were like, we're gonna wrap up filming, and then we'll set a schedule down. We'll like actually do like a studio dinner. And finally, we rented this space in Ohio that's like an arcade, and we everyone had 25 minutes to tell their story, and we had people off camera being like, "You got 10 minutes, wrap it up." And that day, we all just kind of made a pact with each other that like we're just going to be as open and as vulnerable as we can. This is it. It's our last shot doing this. It's our last shot doing the narration. Let's just go for it. And there's a lot of stuff that didn't get used, obviously, for time wise, because our original documentary was like 3 hours and 6 minutes. And so we were like, nobody wants to watch a 3 hour documentary. Like, we got to cut this down. And when Kim and I got that footage, we realized what this documentary was really going to be then, because everybody was so vulnerable and so honest with how this franchise and really just horror in general, how it like helps people cope with mental health and how it is truly that coping mechanism because it helps you learn how to survive. You learn through the final girl. You learn through these characters that you can relate to. The number one question we get all the time is how are people idolizing Freddy-Krueger, a child killer? He's, that's the joke. And it's like, they're not idolizing him. They're seeing themselves in these victims and they're seeing themselves in these heroes. And that is what they're using in these films to cope with trauma, essentially. And so for us, that was like that narration in us sitting down, that just was the best gift for us because then we could build everything around that. And that's what everybody was sending us was this film was their survival story. And so that's how we pieced it together.
It is really weird. There's a scene in New Nightmare where Heather Langenkamp's doing the talk show and she gets surprised by Freddy Krueger and she's just kind of like witnessing like the entire crowd go nuts. And that has always been one kind of thing that I've noticed, like obviously Andy, correct me if it's Never Sleep Again's the documentary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I mean, obviously we probably would have been down for a 3 hour documentary. I want to see the director's cut now.
Okay, I'll give that to distribution when they release the Blu-ray. I'll be like, here's the director's cut, and I don't mind doing that at all.
Yeah, and for people who will be seeing this in the future, just people who don't know really how much goes into making a film, just on a technical aspect, how long? This seemed to have spent a really long time. How long have you guys been working on this documentary before the final cut came
So
out?
we launched at the end of 2016. We started
Wow.
rolling film in 2017, and then we sold it into distribution in 2021. So about 4.5 years, about 4.5 good years it took us to make the documentary.
Wow. So yeah, a labor of love to say the least. To say the least.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, also too, congratulations on distribution because like
Thank you.
that's one of the hardest things I feel like from someone that has a lot of friends that make the independent films and now runs a film festival to celebrate independent films. That's part of the reason that I love film festivals is because you get to experience films not only from parts of the United States that you probably wouldn't experience elsewhere, but also parts of like Canada, Spain, Australia, Norway, just all over the world that you normally wouldn't see. And like chances are you're probably never going to see that movie again unless it gets distribution.
Right. So for us, we really lucked out. We have been saying that like the documentary is the little engine that could, because it's like we hit a hiccup and then we shoot forward. We hit hiccup and we shoot forward, and we just kept struggling, and not struggling, but chugging forward. And we hadn't even had the film really done yet. We had that 3 hour and 6 minute cut, and I sent it to a friend of mine, and I said, "Hey, can I get your opinion?" He used to be like big up in like Fangoria and Dread Central and all that. And I was like, I know you know film and I know you know the genre. I really would like your opinion. I respect your opinion. And he watched it, and that day he said to me, "Can I pitch you our distribution company?" And I was like, absolutely, like of course. So we weren't even really technically done with the film yet, and it already had kind of had interest from distribution. Those conversations naturally start happening behind the scenes. And then after that, we sold it into distribution, and then they sat on it for a year. And that distribution company folded and sold us and Skinamarink to Bayview. And Bayview Entertainment came in, and they're the ones who gave us the deal. So we never had to really experience the shopping it around. And I feel like we missed that, because when we signed our distribution deal, we weren't allowed to put it in any festivals. I had to pull out of several festivals. And so for me, I'm so excited to like screen it at your festival, because I want to see it with an audience. Like we saw it at Horror Hound Weekend, where we had our like world premiere, and it was so much fun. It was so great. But like I don't watch the film. Like I watch the audience. I'm watching the people. And so I've been like itching since September. And so we didn't really get to do that like film festival circuit. So now I'm excited for that. But distribution, I have so many friends who are in this documentary space, like the Screen Queens and all of that. And they're like, wow, that's like crazy. Like that doesn't happen. Like a distribution deal doesn't happen like that. You typically have to shop it.
That's that's incredible. And it's not you guys aren't the only official selection that we have this year that has been picked up by Bayview. Also, Bliss of Evil, which we're gonna have the writer director Josh Morris on in a couple of weeks, which I'm really excited about. That's awesome. You never ever hear that, and so like that makes me like that much more excited to experience this with you guys because when we were starting to craft goals for this season, one of the things that I wanted more than anything was I was like, I want a documentary because documentaries are, I feel like documentaries in horror are just vastly long. Like we previously mentioned, Nightmare, Never Sleep Again, one, Camp Crystal Lake Memories, Leviathan. Like these are all like 3-4 hour ones.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's always like really hard to like find like one that's like under 2 hours, but somehow has like, or like 2 hours. In your guys' case, it's like 2:19. And so you guys, it's always like trying to like find like that needle in a haystack to say, all right, how can horror, mental health, and a documentary all co-align?
Yeah. I love like documentaries, and especially on like horror documentaries. I'm such a nerd. Like I'm the person who, when we're watching a film, I have to be like IMDb. Even if I've never seen the film, I have to, because I'm looking at all the trivia. I want to know who filmed it. I want to know who the cinematographer was. I want to know where the locations were. Sometimes I want to know who the FX guys are. Like I love documentaries. Like that I think is the space that I'm probably going to stay in for a little bit. We're currently in pre-production of another one for another fandom, and I'm super excited about it. And I can't talk about it yet, but I love that, because I love the telling of stories and learning about.
Can you like talk about it off air? Wink, wink.
I can't. My team would kill me. I'll just say that it's kind of in the horror space, and I feel like if people if people follow my content, or if people know anything about me growing up or my life or anything, it's going to make so much sense when we announce it what it is. It's going to be like oh, duh, why didn't she do this before Fred had? Or like it's going to be like that type of thing. Um, but I wish I could talk about it, but I can't. But it's very exciting. We're in the pre-production phase. We've started having conversations with some people who are going to appear in it. Our thing too that we like to do is we're four women who produced this documentary in a typically male driven space, right? And so for us, like we want to feature like different people. We don't want to keep seeing the same five people that we see in like every documentary. So like we want to feature people that you wouldn't necessarily like see like with some people who are like some podcasters or people who do like YouTube videos or some like people on film Twitter or some TikTokers like people who only have like 3,000 followers, you know, like those types of people, they deserve their story to be told too. You know, they deserve to be heard and featured in documentaries. So for this one that's coming up, I've got like a list of 15 people exclusively in the community in the space that I've like reached out to that I've been like, hey, wink, here's the next project. Do you want to be a part of it? I just found out you're a big fan or of this, you know, this franchise that we're gonna do. And most everybody has been like on board. Most everybody's like, yeah, hell yeah. Oh my God, that's awesome. And I love it because it like gets different faces out there.
Oh, I
I
think
wish I
that's
could tell
really,
you.
yeah, I think that's really smart. I mean, when the heart of Fred Heads is community, and so you're using that community to then help make more movies. I think focusing on kind of, as you said, like people who aren't always the focus of these documentaries is a really smart avenue to go. And I know, like I said, that's what caught me on the heart of Fred Heads. So I'm excited for when you can make this announcement. I'll be looking for it.
Thank you. Hopefully soon. We're hoping to have everything done and ready to go. Because as with anything, we're probably gonna have to use crowdfunding, like Kickstarter or Indiegogo or something. And so we're hoping to have everything to launch right before summer. So like hopefully the end of May.
Well, that door, this door is open, so if you want to come back and promote it, you know, we
Yes,
can
thank you.
always do that because I always I'm always like a big supporter of that kind of stuff and because I know how hard crowdfunding is, having done it myself, and now as the president of our nonprofit here is incredibly hard to ask people for money. But you know,
Yeah,
if
and
you're
it's
listening and you want to support us on Patreon, you know, just
yeah, yeah. Well, go to his
Patreon,
Patreon.
go for it. It's patreon.com/victims and villains.
So I don't know if you I'm gonna off when we're off camera, I'll tell you guys what it is, but you guys can't tell anybody. Because I have a
Oh,
feeling you guys might be fans of it. And so
fingers
if you
crossed.
are, you guys should definitely be a part of it as
Oh,
well.
I'm excited.
Yeah, same. All right. Well, one of the last things that I want to ask that I'm very curious about. If you guys follow us on our socials, you know that when we talk about Fred heads, we have been using this picture of a Freddy cosplayer. It's one of my favorite images in your guys's EPKs. I'm curious, how like long did you guys actually have to like search to find a cosplayer as good as him?
So are you I'm assuming that you're referencing Bill.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I wrote
Uh
his name in my notes because that's how
yeah.
good he was. I have William Adams wrote because that's how he was credited at the bottom.
Yeah, so that's his stage name. His stage name is William Adams. We've been friends for like 14 years, like 15 years, so we didn't have to go far. We all met in so Deandra and I met a really long time ago. We met when she was like 15 years old. She's my best friend. She's been my best friend for like 15 years. And we started cosplaying. Like Deandra was cosplaying. She talks about it in the documentary, but then I started like costuming. I was doing Kristen Parker and then Jennifer Caulfield. Like I actually had the TV, which is back there on the set. I had the TV where I like looked like I was going through it, and he was our Freddy. And so we all just were like a little group, like a little nightmare group. It was myself, Deandra, him, and Taylor Bursky. And she dressed as Alice. And so it was just us. It was, we run around conventions like kids in a candy store and be in costume. And then in 2016, that's what sparked Redheads. Was in 2016 we filmed Don't Fall Asleep with Heather Langenkamp, and that is the untold story of Nancy Thompson. So it's what happens between 1 and 3, and it's based on the canon comic books by Andy Mangles. And when we did that, we knew that we needed a Freddy Krueger, and his impersonation of Freddy is just absolutely amazing. So we asked him to be a part of it, and he was like overjoyed. And from there, we were like, if we do this documentary that we're thinking about, would you mind being a part of it? And he's like, absolutely not. So he did like all of our promotion stuff on our Indiegogo. He did all of our Indiegogo promotions, anything we needed for social media. Him and his wife Barbara were absolutely amazing. They had a green screen like set up in their studio, so like she'd film stuff and send it to us, or Kim would go there because they live relatively close. I live on the East Coast and they're in the Midwest, and so Kim would go there, and so she would like film some stuff. So he always was a part of it, but he never knew how big of a part of it he was. And so we showed up one day and we're like, Bill, we gotta get some questions from you. Like we gotta get some stuff from you. And he's like, okay. And so we show up and we're like filming him and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, okay. He's like, so you think you might use some of it? I was like, yeah, there was like one or two things we'll use. And like knowing in our head that like him and I had this full scale plan that like we were building this whole section around him. And that's why we literally went there to get him. And so when we filmed at a ton of conventions, and Horror Hound was our main convention. It's who we partnered with. And we brought him to Horror Hound. And we had a cinematographer, Larry Dubois. And we just said, go play. Like, we've got everything that we need now. We're good. This is just fun footage. Follow Bill for the day and just play and just have fun. He has no clue that he's being featured in the documentary. And just, we have hours of footage of him that we couldn't use because obviously there's not enough space. And we thought that we were potentially, and we still might do it for the Blu-ray release, creating a smaller documentary called Mr. Bill, and like doing like his life, because his life is so crazy, because we don't even go into it in the documentary about how his whole purpose is just like really helping people and making people smile. And he is a teacher, or I think he's a teacher. He works in the schools and he works with kids, and they call him Mr. Bill, and they come up to him and give him hugs every day and give him photos. And him and his wife own a costuming company, so like when they do like school events, like he goes and dresses up like SpongeBob for them, and they all just love him, and he just really feels like it's his mission in life. And he's honestly just one of the best people I've ever met in my entire life, and I'm so thankful for our friendship. He's absolutely brilliant, and we're so glad that like fans are stepping to that. Everyone loves it. Everybody talks about it. Everybody talks about it, and they talk about cosplaying. Like, they all love it.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
I really just want like the full like deleted scene of like the dance off between him and R2D2. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie.
It was so much longer, but our attorney made us cut it because of music, because it's actually Staying Alive. It's so you hear the whole Staying Alive. You see Tuesday, you see her mom, everybody's cracking up in the back, and you see the circles start to form around it. And when we sent it for to make sure it would clear the E&O insurance, our attorney's like, this is a great moment and I love it, but you've got to cut it all the way down. She's like, you can't have any of the music playing because the Bee Gees won't give you the rights. So we're like, okay. So we had to like cut it, and we shrunk it over them talking more so that way you could see it a little bit more. But I wish we could release the extended version. Maybe we'll do it as like a social media clip or something because it is hilarious. It's so funny.
Well, speaking of cosplayers, this is going to be the official thing that we're going to be doing. We announced this a couple of weeks ago on Horrific Hopes Facebook page, but these are the official rules. If you are interested in entering into the Nightmare on Elm Street cosplay contest, Paige is going to tell you about what you're going to win in just a second. But we have 3 simple rules, and they are as followed. You must enter into do it. This is going to be a fundraising event for us within the fundraising event. So it's going to be $3 to enter. All that money is going to get mental health resources into film festivals, conventions, churches, schools, etc. Anywhere we can get in, you are going to be partnering with us to do that. 2, if you are going to wear a Freddy-Krueger mask, you have to only be wearing it in the theater. You cannot wear it outside of the theater. That is the rules of the Alamo Draft House. And 3, do not feel like you have to limit it to Freddy Krueger. There are so many people in the Nightmare on Elm Street canon. So come as Nancy, come as Glenn, come as
in a body bag, as the documentary showed us.
Yeah, like get creative with it. So we'll have a official sign up down below, and if we don't have enough interest, our friends over with Fredheads, they're gonna be doing Freddy Krueger trivia as well. So but Paige, what will people win if they decide to enter?
So from our end, we're giving away an autographed DVD from the directors and a pair of our limited edition sunglasses. We have a pair of red sunglasses that everybody has wanted, and we have one left that we're reserving for your festival. We haven't had them in years. We only gave them out at our original film. So this is our original filming sunglasses that everybody wanted. They're just like Freddy.
That's amazing. And you guys will also win a free pass for next year's film festival as well. So make sure that you guys enter down below. And we'll see you guys April 14th and 15th at the Alamo Draft House in Winchester, Virginia. But Mr. Andy, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, today we are talking about what many call possibly the best sequel of Nightmare on Elm Street. We're talking about Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors.
I got hot takes on this movie, like hot take after hot take.
No, I don't know if we're gonna be friends after this.
You got me worried with your hot takes after we went through the Halloween franchise. You hit me with like 6 hot takes.
Let's see if I can change your mind on some of these hot takes. That's what I love.
We've actually never talked Freddy, so I'm curious as to what you think.
Look, my hot take on this movie is that this movie, I feel like it's maybe this is because I grew up in the 90s. This movie, I feel like, is slightly overrated. I still love this movie. It's just a smidge overrated. Because I still reserve that the original and New Nightmare are like the brilliant bookends of this. Everything else, I love everything else in between that. That includes Freddy's Revenge as well. Dream Child, all of those. But
I'd like to hear your opinions, and I love New Nightmare. I love the original, but the way I pitch the series to people who don't really watch it or have never watched any of them, I always say if you watch 1, 3, and then New Nightmare, you get like a perfect little trilogy with the same actors, the same creators. That's a saga right there. But I can't co-sign you on the overrated. I think this is probably like pound for pound. I think it does everything I want to see in a sequel without.
Were you raised on Scream? Were you raised on like the Scream films and stuff?
I was raised on the Screams, so
that makes total sense.
That's partially why like Scream was like one of the very first slashers that I watched. It was the first slasher franchise I got into. So like seeing like his early blueprint with New Nightmare, I was like,
right.
God, there was like a period of time where like I would only watch New Nightmare. So like the rest of the series kind of came later. So
that makes
like
sense,
I said,
then.
Hot take.
Yeah, it makes sense then that you wouldn't that wouldn't be your go-to. You know, there wouldn't be a Scream without New Nightmare. But there wouldn't be a New Nightmare how Dream Warriors. That's how I always say. And I love both.
That's also very true. And like I said, like, so don't come after me on Twitter. Like I love this movie. I am. This is the only movie that horror movies that I will sit until the end because Dokken, that thing still slaps. I'm a huge David Lynch fan, so of course Angelo Badalamenti coming in clutch with that score. Like just this movie, I feel like I don't know. I feel like I've dug myself into a hole that I can't get out of now.
No, say it. We're not. I'm not going to judge you. I listen. I get a lot of hate for not liking Scream 4, and I talk a lot about on like my TikTok. I talk a lot about Scream because I'm a Wes Craven fan. I love horror. Obviously, behind me, I love horror. But in general, I'm a Wes Craven fan, and so I get shit on a lot for not liking Scream 4. I get death threats for not liking Scream 4. So I'm not gonna like
this. Everybody,
judge
this is
anybody.
crazy. Scream 4 is my second favorite Scream movie, and Nightmare 3 is my second favorite Nightmare movie. So I'm getting hit from both angles right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this movie, I definitely think it has original. I love what they've done. And I've definitely had a stronger appreciation for Freddy's Revenge, especially after meeting Mark. I got to attend a live commentary between him and the director last year. Scream Queen is one of like the best documentaries I feel like has been made in the last 10 years. And like I watching it this past time to prepare for this episode, like you just did like Andy, you were saying, like it first one, third one, New Nightmare. It's a perfect trilogy. This is what the original like second film should have been.
Right.
Yeah, I'll go on, Paige.
No, I was gonna say I agree. That's all.
Yeah, I am a big fan of part two. I've grown to love it. As a kid, I didn't like it because it was just weird to me. But over time, as I learned the story behind it, I like it a lot. But it's a weird part two. You can say that effect. This just feels like kind of the next logical progression in terms of just the special effects, the creativeness and the nightmares, and kind of just taking that next step where the first film was all kind of about an individual person learning how to overcome Freddy, and this is more of like the group working together to stop him for good. And I think narratively, if you kind of ended it here, it would make perfect sense to me. I know you have the little twist ending at the end with the light, but overall, I don't know. To me, this feels like a proper part two to that first movie.
For sure.
And structure. Go ahead, Paige.
No, I
Sorry.
was just say for sure. I think I love part two as well. Like I was same thing when I was a kid. I wasn't into it as much. I enjoyed it, but growing up, I liked part two because I like that they mentioned Nancy. I like the kills in part two. I think are great. At like the pool scene, I think is really cool. But the cohesiveness really is 1 and 3, and just in general, moving forward after that, everything always ties back to 1 and 3. So it's like 2 just kind of is like washed away in the series and like never mentioned again.
Okay, so like I want to try and figure out this timeline. Andy, when we did the Halloween franchise together, we like nailed down the Halloween timeline. So this is Paige brought up a great point because when you watch part two talks about that there's been a 5-year gap between 1 and 2, where this one makes no mention of part 2. When you watch part 4, part 5, and part 6, there's no mention whatsoever of part 2. Part 2 is like just like the outlier. It's the season of the witch of this franchise.
Yeah,
Right.
even in like Freddy's powers, like those don't even come back. Like the things he can do in part 2 don't get revisited.
But I can explain all of it. Like I can tie all of them together. I can even tie in why his powers are no longer there, how he had the powers in the second to begin with, and how the second film does connect to the third film. But that's just because I'm obsessed with this franchise. And so I've studied it as I could teach it as a thesis. I could teach it as a college course. So I can actually say how it all goes if you wanted to know.
Please, you are our resident expert here.
Okay, so Nancy is 16 years old in the original film. And then what happens is at the end, she opens the door. And in the canon storyline that was created by New Line Cinema, she goes out and her dad realizes oh shit, I have to do something. So he puts her in a mental institution. So Nancy is put into a mental institution, and Don sells the house. So he sells the house to the Walshes. Jesse goes through all of this because Nancy pulled him out of the dream at the end of the first one, but he's now trapped in the house. And so he can't leave. So Jesse becomes his avatar, his body, because now here he is. He's trapped in this house. It's the house is becoming the lore. The house is becoming where he is stuck. And so he gets himself trapped into Jesse. He almost gets fully out. He can almost do it. And then the love of Lisa at the end, the love overcomes all, kills Freddy. But then in the third one, you hear Kristen say it's his house. It's where he lives. And she builds the house. So she builds this dollhouse, this paper mache house. And what a lot of people don't realize is the house that you're seeing in part 3 and from 3 on is that paper mache house. It's no longer Nancy's house that they're going into, which is why the rooms always look different. The flow of the house always changes. And in 3, when they fall out of the mirrors, you see the actual newspaper from behind the mirrors. And then also in part 3, when Nancy and Neil are talking and they say, you know, we lost a kid to Fairview a couple months ago. He cut off his own eyelids. There's a huge fan theory that that is Jesse, because in part 2, they talk about institutionalizing. In part 2, they saying, are you on drugs? Do we need to bring you somewhere? Do we need to put you somewhere? And they're like, he's like, no, Dad, I'm fine. I don't need to go anywhere. Well, where else would he go other than Weston Hills, which is the only place in Springwood? It's a small town in the Midwest. And so the theory is that in part 3, the kid that they're referencing is Jesse. And so for us as a fandom, we've kind of adopted that as being like, oh, okay, that's what it is, because we like to incorporate him in. But everything moving from 2 is he's trapped in the house. And so Kristen has that ability to bring people in the dreams, right? And so he keeps sucking her back into the house so he can suck all the people, all the souls, and get stronger and eventually get out of the house, which is what he eventually does. He eventually gets out of the house. And then they just tie in from there from everyone after that.
That actually made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
This isn't my go-to franchise. I love it a lot, but I like some other stuff more, so I've never really applied that level of thought to it. But yeah, that made a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And like to like tie like Fredheads back into that, I think that's one of the things that like I really took away from your documentary is that like, you know, for me, like my I love I'm much like Andy. Like to me there are a few other franchises ahead of Freddy, but like when you talk to someone that has endured and kind of goes through some of the same things that characters like Kristen and Taryn, is that how you say her name?
Aaron.
Taryn. And like Nancy and Jesse, like when you go through stuff like that, clearly like you are tied to that. And that's one of the things that I love about like specific horror franchises is that like there's always like that deep rooted story as to why they are connected to that franchise.
Right. We I think so I go back and forth on my favorite being between New Nightmare and Dream Warriors. And I always say as a whole, as all of Wes Craven's film, as all of the Nightmare films, Wes Craven's New Nightmare is my favorite film. It's beautiful, it's the best film. It's a masterpiece in what film should be. It's a masterpiece in cinematography and score, that J. Peter Robinson score. Patrick Lussier who edited it, like it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. But if we're looking at like canon storyline in the Nightmare universe, Dream Warriors is my favorite. And I think because in this film, it's before he's too comical. It's before he's too MTV Freddy, which he became in 4, which I love 4. And I think that it also adds more of a serious tone. I think a lot of people resonate with Dream Warriors based on the mental health aspect and really seeing how cruel Freddy is and what these kids are trying to get over. So let's take Taryn as an example. she's working so hard in her recovery, and she's working so hard to not backslide and use these drugs and do this. And she's overcoming all of this. And she's got the orderly who's offering her the night at club meth and, saying, who's going to believe you? And you're just a crazy junkie chick. And she's fighting so hard to present as this strong person. And then in the end, Freddie uses that against her. And, what happens to you in your dream happens to you in real life. So he injects her with drugs. And in her life now, people are going to think that she just overdosed. And so that's incredibly sad. And a lot of people relate to that and relate to her struggle of overcoming addiction. When we talked to Jennifer, she talked a lot about that as well. We a lot of what we filmed with her, we ended up not using, and I wish that we could have used some of it. But again, it was so much longer, our documentary. But a lot of people come up to her and just say those things like, you helped me overcome addiction. And I think that's why this film is so, it just resonates so much. Like Kristen, I loved the character of Kristen growing up. I really related to her. She, had a mother who didn't really pay attention to her or really give a shit about her. And, I love my mom and we have an amazing relationship now. But growing up, I kind of always questioned, her love and questioned our closeness. And I really related to her character of just kind of being alone all the time and in your thoughts. And I think that a lot of people just really see themselves in these characters, and Dream Warriors sets that standard. It even sets that standard for future films of like when their sequels come out, it's like, does it meet the Dream Warrior standard? Does it meet did it do better than the original and become so beloved and bring these beloved characters back like Nancy and Don Thompson and while incorporating these newer characters that expand the mythos of the series. And I think that's why it just really is that gem and just holds like this magic in a bottle that the other films just don't necessarily have.
Yeah, I think in the slasher genre in general, this cast stands apart. A lot of what you said, because most of the times we're working with archetypes. So we'll watch a film where it's there's a nerd and a jock and a dumb blonde. And with this, because each person is so individually rooted to a specific either issue in their life or some sort of mental health thing, I think it's way more relatable for different people to grasp on because, they might not be as severe as some of these characters, but we've all had issues that we could relate.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Yeah, I really like, there's a lot to unpack there, and I agree with both of you guys, everything you're saying, like specifically about this one. When you look at structurally how Freddy's handled in the first film, a lot of shadows, a lot of hiding, and they kind of do that with two, but it definitely feels like with three, you definitely almost have this like copy and paste feature with how they handle Freddy. Like Freddy is menacing in this one, and it's because they have the use of the shadows and the way that he's lit and the way that he's like constructed down to here. And Taryn's death in particular, out of any death in the Nightmare series, it's the closest to home for me, because I've had friends, loved ones, family members that have struggled with addiction, have relapsed, and also I've known people that have OD'd, And like I struggle. I have traits in my life that border addiction. Um, and so like I understand the struggle of that her character goes through in this movie because like from someone that is like really addicted to like if I sit down and I am just using this as an example, I've been recently just going back through and rewatching South Park and like, you know, you sit down for a single episode and before you know it, you're in 6 episodes deep. And it's really easy to watch something like that in today's market. I'm using that as like an example, but um, you know, for someone that has struggled in the past with addiction, it's about really busying yourself and making sure that that relapse doesn't happen. And the balance of like it's been X amount of days since my last hit, or it's been X amount of days since I've done this trade, or I've gone and done this toxic trait. I mean, it almost kind of has this like losing mentality. Um, so like you always you're always essentially replacing one addiction with another. So to find a healthier mechanism, coping mechanism, and it's that's been something that like I've struggled with for probably my entire adult life, and it's to this day, and like it sucks. So like seeing her like have this victory all the way up, especially like the way that she is like this badass entering into the alley. She's got spiked hair, she's got the knives, she just looks cool, and then she just like essentially loses, or she even has a chance to fight. Um, it's a really tough scene to watch.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't really watch her kill scene often. There's several kill scenes in the series that I won't watch. Like I don't watch Tina's death in the original. It's really hard for me because I'm friends with Amanda West. So like her acting is so great that I tell her all the time, I was like, I can't watch her death scene because like it's like literally watching my friend get brutalized. I know it's fake, but like it's her death scene is crazy. And then Terrence is the other one that I can't watch. It's just it's too sad for me. So I am a active in recovery addict and I have been clean for over 10 years. And
Nice.
I think and it is hard. It's probably the hardest one for me to watch. And it's because of her pain in the end. And you see it in her face, like Jennifer Rubin. Like she does not
Yeah.
get enough credit. She is an amazing actress. And that role just it's a role that's very real. All of these kids are just very real. None of them are perfect. They're not overly gorgeous. They're not in super shape. Like they're real people. And like again, I think that's why the fandom just gravitates towards three so much. And in part four, I think tried to mimic that. And I think they did it in a little bit of a funner way, a little more lighthearted way. And I think that's why four is so popular as well. And so I always say three and four go well together. That you could start three and go all the way into four, and just it's like the perfect two films.
I feel like Taryn's death in particular is like also hard to watch because like the way that I mean the practical effects in that are amazing.
Oh my god, and the
Uh
sound design.
yeah.
They
So
have like
but
a squishy noise. Oh my god, it's
eh,
disgusting.
yeah, but that like that squishy noise, like it almost kind of seems like it makes a little bit light of that situation. And you know, I understand the 80s were a different time.
Yeah.
And we've also learned a lot of stuff, but like it does like we can talk about the practical effects now because I'm gonna get sad.
Oh yeah,
What was your
this is
guys'
what I can
favorite
talk.
effect in it? What did you guys love about it? Like, what was that? Like mine, I love the snake. I love
Yeah,
the
I
whole
was gonna
snake
say
scene.
the snake. It's still to this day I watch it and I'm like, how did they propel her in the air like that? The Never Sleep Again documentary shows a lot of good footage about it, but
There's a lot
that
of
snake.
FX footage online on YouTube. I can send it to you guys. There's a lot of like behind the scenes footage of where we try to get it licensed to use it in our documentary. We couldn't, but there's a lot of stuff, and they show the entire process of how they do it. It's really cool. It's really cool.
Oh
I'll have to
wow,
send it to you.
yeah, I want to see it because that. I mean, for me, that was as a kid. That's why I gravitated to this one. Also, not just the fantastical elements, but I've always been a practical effect hound since seeing my first George Romero movie back in whenever I was growing up. And this one just is through the roof. And then also like learning about Chuck Russell, the director, and knowing he would go on to do like The Mask and these other really special effects heavy things. So I was like, I could see where he got his chops because everything looks great in this.
Yeah, the Nightmare franchise with like the directors that they like gave like shots to is crazy. Uh, because what's the other guy? He went on
Rennie
to go
Harlan.
do
Rennie
yeah, Rennie
Harlan, yeah.
Harlan.
Yeah.
Now he's working on a remake of The Strangers, and
Yeah.
it's gonna be a trilogy. Mind blown.
It's crazy because even like if you look at like Rachel Talalay, she started in the mailroom, and then
Yeah.
she went on. She then like directed Freddy's Dead, but then after that, like Rachel Talalay is like a huge director now. She does like Doctor Who, Riverdale. Like she's a big time. And a lot of these, they all got their start on Night. I mean, look at Larry Fishburne. Larry
Yeah.
Fishburne got his start in Dream.
Oh, Larry. I know.
Little Larry. If I ever have him sign my Dream Warriors poster, I'm gonna have him sign Larry.
Yeah.
If I ever see him on the street and I'm like, Mr. Fishburne, can you fix Dream Warriors poster? Like,
I'm
sure.
not
I'd be like,
disrespecting you, but you're Larry to me.
can you sign it, Larry?
Yeah.
Or
Cool.
Patricia Arquette. Look at Patricia Arquette. She's an awesome.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I say that like, and this is in no, I love all horror. So this is like not meant to shade any horror whatsoever. And if you look at like Halloween broke huge records because it was like the highest grossing independent film. It was insane what Halloween did, right? And what John Carpenter did and what he was able to do with that. And I think that like there was a lot of great horror before the Nightmare series, but I feel like A Nightmare on Elm Street is what really started to get people to take horror serious. I think that was the real for me. I feel like that the slasher era was real great. I feel like they were like the big stars of like the slasher era, but I feel like A Nightmare on Elm Street started making people think like not I hate using that term smart horror because it's so dumb because all horror is smart to me. But like I think that people started realizing that like, oh, there could be more to a horror film than just a guy in a hockey mask or just, a girl screaming. Like that you could invest in these characters. Like in the way that they could with Halloween. I think that's why Halloween was so popular, is because you could look at the characters of like Laurie Strode and stuff like that, and they're real relatable characters. And I think those are the types of films that ultimately are the ones that do really well. Like look at Scream. Like Scream,
Yeah.
you care about the characters. If you're just in it for fun and you're in it for the slasherness, and that's great. That's fun in itself. Those films have their place too. But I feel like mainstream media really picked up on Freddy, and I feel like they blew it up. Even just in the Dream Warriors, like all of the media around Dream Warriors, until the next year when Dream Master did it, was the highest grossing independent film of all time. Was like for the opening weekend. It was, I think, and the media around it just made it like for the first time an independent film. Like I think that people were looking at it a little different. That it wasn't just a guy in a hockey mask killing random girls. That you were looking at these kids as real characters that were really written, and that I think that's why there are so many successful people from Nightmare, is because they went on to do these bigger projects and do these bigger films like Rennie Harlan or Chuck Russell and Frank Darabont and all these people, or Robert Englund. Like thinking about Robert Englund and who he is and what he's done since Freddy. Like I think that like for me, when I look at everything from the media scape, I feel like that's when the media really started taking a look at horror as something real and not like, oh, let's get rid of it. It's too explicitive, it's too bloody, it's too this, it's too that. It almost was like, okay, let's celebrate it. And then we got things like Pinhead, and we got more Halloween sequels, and I think that those things, like I don't think a lot of that could have been as successful if Nightmare wasn't as successful. Because I hope I'm making sense saying that.
You are, but like I'm also like now you said something that like caught my attention to where like and Andy, I'm curious to hear how you feel about it. Like I can't think of anything outside of Freddy, at least the first Nightmare, maybe even this one, like where you can kind of tell that horror is starting to be taken seriously. I mean, Halloween, I would argue, is definitely in that
Yeah.
camp.
Or
Yeah, there's
Exorcist,
few. Yeah, I was gonna say The Exorcist probably is the first thing that popped in my
Exorcist,
head,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I can't think of too many. I mean, especially leading everything before the 70s, it was always a B genre. Even when people loved the Frankenstein or Dracula, it never really got full respect. So yeah, I think I might be able to pull a couple more examples, but yeah, Worldwide and like Psycho, there's always a couple
Yeah.
outliers, but
Yeah.
outside of that, and you also made me think, Paige, what this also kind of did was it did change the slasher genre, because if you look between the period of Halloween and the first Nightmare, so much slasher movies got pumped out. We don't really remember most of them because they didn't have a big cultural impact outside of your Friday the 13th and such, and maybe your sleepaway camps. I'm not
Yeah.
sure the year of that. I might be wrong what year that came out.
It was
But
like
this
mid. That was like I think Sleepaway Camp was 83.
okay, so yeah,
I
very
should
close.
know that. I'm the second unit DP on the Angela doc. I should know that, but I don't know the year.
But Nightmare just giving kind of a voice to the killer and a personality, I think you can watch that reverberate through horror easily with your Chuckies, your Pinheads, your Leprechauns. Like we no longer as audiences really wanted a silent killer with no mask on, even to the point where we're talking about Scream. Yes, it's a guy with a mask, but the voice is 80% of it. It's like we're there for Roger Jackson's voice.
Right.
So I think that's another big thing that outside of just taking it seriously is giving a personality to the protagonist or antagonist. Switch the words.
But I also want to to jumping off that, there's another shift that happens, is not just the fact that you have this wisecracker cracking guy that would, eventually, as Paige coined, would be MTV Freddy at one point. But this is the first time too that, to come back to the kids, this is the first time that you're having actual potential victims of said killer that feel relatable. Because when you look at that era of Halloween to Nightmare on Elm Street, all of those slashers that were direct to video and that now have a cult following, a lot of those are very just we're pumping them out. So, paper thin characters. We're here for their people are coming for the kills. And I think when you have characters like Nancy and Kristen and really anyone in this cast, you are showcasing that you can have killers that are doing these really wicked, gnarly gags, but also at the same time you can bring depth to them. And he also gave us the supernatural, because up to that point, everything was a guy in a mask.
Or vaguely supernatural. It's like
Yeah.
we winked at it, like with Halloween.
Also Jason.
Yeah. I don't want to put you back in that initial hole you dug, Josh, but I haven't been hearing a lot of complaints for someone who said this movie was overrated. So
Are we changing your mind a little bit?
Look, you're not. First off, not changing my mind. Second off, it's top three. It's top three. I think that New Nightmare gets left out of the conversation because of Dream Warriors.
100%.
I could see that. I could see that. Yeah.
That's why I think this movie is overrated. A little bit overrated. I don't think it's better than New Nightmare. New Nightmare is better than Dream Warriors.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put it out
think
there and say
I
that.
think most people and most in the fandom would agree with that too, but maybe you're meaning overhyped instead of
overhyped. That's
maybe
the better
overhyped,
word.
Yeah. Because for me,
Overhyped,
I will say this one to me is the most fun. I think if I was gonna throw one on, it would be Dream Warriors. But while it is disturbing, it doesn't quite have the visceral scares of the original movie.
Right.
The original movie, if I watched it on the right night with the lights off alone, it can still kind of scare me. I don't really get scared of Dream Warriors. I can get really disturbed by some of the stuff, by the suicides and the drug overdose and things like that. But it's definitely more of a fantastical kind of it's the perfect blend of Freddy for me when I want to just have a good time, because like you said, it's the start of the MTV occasion of him, but he's still that original Freddy. So I just think from a fun factor, but I do think One and New Nightmare are better films for me personally.
Here's another hot take for you. I would say the funnest film in this franchise is Freddy's Dead.
Did you
Ah,
see the shock on my face?
I
I
don't.
like
I'm
Freddy's
sorry.
Dead.
I don't. I can't even act like I can pretend I do, but
It's
it's a slog to get through for me, man. I
look,
don't.
it is so dumb, but I have so
Um,
much fun with it every time I watch it with the video game sequence with uh why am I drawing the blank on the dude's name?
Breckin Meyer,
Breckenmeyer.
Spencer,
Breckin Myers,
Yeah.
like
Spencer.
the random
Cameos.
cameos of Roseanne and Tom Arnold,
And who's that? Alice
uh,
Cooper, I think. Is that who plays his?
Alice
No,
Alice
is
Cooper's
that?
Alice
dad.
Cooper, like
Come
Yeah.
on,
That's
Alice
it's
actually
Cooper's Freddy's dad.
that's actually
Like,
pretty great casting.
it's a
it's
popcorn
so
flick. It's you
yeah.
pop some popcorn and
Yeah.
you bounce on your couch and you throw it on and you just know you're laughing and like it's not in the storyline. But do you guys know that like the main character in that his name is John Doe? Do you know who he's supposed to be? He's supposed
No.
to
No.
be he is Jacob from part 5.
No,
Oh,
interesting.
really?
Yeah. So
Ah.
the original script is he is Jacob and he has amnesia. And they had just come off of doing Crybaby, and Rachel Talalay is like, we need to do a funny one. That's the natural. Our last film was so dark. Let's do something funny. And so they took that script and they just took the name out of it, but it's still the same character. So
Wow.
so everyone in the like fandom who's obsessed like I am, we all know that's actually supposed to be Jacob. And they were going to bring the Dream Warriors back in and everything, but they just nixed that. Instead of bringing the Dream Warriors, they brought in like Tom Arnold and Roseanne and stuff. So it's just
Also,
a fun film.
yeah, Johnny Depp comes back too. This is
But
your
is he
this is your
Glenn or
brain
is
on
he
eggs.
Johnny Depp? Is he Glenn or is he Johnny Depp? That's the thing that in the fandom is like the come on, you gotta know. Like you're Rachel Talalay. You worked on every film. Like this
Yeah.
is Glenn. It's not Johnny Depp. It's Glenn. So but
Yeah,
it's
I
fine.
like it more as this
Yeah.
Glenn because it's like Freddy kind of using his victims to torment, like his past
Yeah.
victims to torment new ones. I like that.
But like I think for me, like I want to also like preface this by saying that like I don't go out of my way to watch Freddy's Dead. It's when you go do the franchise rewatch, I'm like I don't dread it the way that I used to. Like I rewatched them last summer and I was surprised by how much fun I had with it. I was like, I remember this being a lot dumber, but this was a lot of fun.
I am. I love it. I watch it every Halloween. So every Halloween I watch the original and then I watch part 6. Because when I was a kid, part 6 was the one that came on the most. I'm from Chicago. And so Chicago, like their affiliates were huge Halloween fans. We had a mayor who like it was almost like a national holiday for us in Chicago, how much we loved Halloween. And so like all of the like local stations always would air Nightmare on Elm Street films all the time. So like like we I can't think of his name now. I'm spacing on his name. Svengoolie. So like we had like Svengoolie, like and he was our local horror host. And so they always played part 6 because it's like the least one, I guess, that the censors would make you cut because like there's not a whole lot of bloody kills in it. It's just like fun stuff, like the Carlos head exploding and stuff like that. So as a kid, I saw that one all the time, and so I use that as like a memory of like I'll watch it around like Halloween, but I typically only watch it like once or twice a year, and I watch Nightmare throughout the year.
But coming back to Dream Warriors, I think one of the things that, talking about mental health is this is also kind of the first film in horror to kind of explore the mental health of the victims. Obviously, at this point, Halloween's done it, X amount of times with H2O, 2018, Kills, Ends, etc. And most famously, probably my biggest hot take of all, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, great movie. Um,
I like the Rob Zombie Halloween. I like them.
I
I almost like them better than the original.
I do too. Yeah, as you can see the poster hanging behind me.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think this film is like paramount when you talk about the mental health, especially in horror, because you see not only what has become of Nancy, who, said, I'm going to basically step in and study mental health and medicine so that what happened to me doesn't happen to other people. And then on the other side of that, you also have her father that is basically become a functioning alcoholic in order to cope.
Yeah, and he got demoted from his job. So a lot of people don't know that. If you look at his badge, he's no longer the sheriff, he's a security guard. And so it's like, what did he have to do and what did he go through in that first film? Because in the original film, he doesn't believe her. He doesn't take her serious. Nobody believes her.
Hmm.
And in the end, she realizes that she's all she has left is just herself. And so in that final scene in the original film, like you see it in his face and you see the shock of, I've been wrong this whole time. Oh my, I caused this. I'm the reason why all of this has happened because he's the one who murdered. And so like I caused this whole thing. And you're seeing in Dream Warriors the ramifications of it. And so you're seeing him, he's an alcoholic, he's lost everything. He's lost his wife, he's lost his daughter, he's lost his job. What else does he have? Nothing. And so he sits there and he drinks all day long. And you see, I love that. I love this scene between him and Nancy when they're in the bar and she's like, "You owe me. Like you owe me. Like why are you doing this to me again? Like you know that this is real. I can't believe you're putting me through this. Here we are 6 years later and it's happening again and you're going to sit there and not do anything about it." You see this like defeatedness in her as like she comes from two toxic parents who she's had to raise herself. And now she's like coming to you again for help and you're letting her down again. And it shows the realness of families and shows the realness of trauma and situations that can happen and what you do and what you turn to. It's such a great film. This is why I love it.
Yeah, and I also, I mean, it doesn't make it fun to watch, but it's also so much more real, the fact that they don't even really resolve their problems. Like, yes, he does eventually go to help and solve it, but he eventually dies without resolving it with his daughter. And then even when we think that they are having that beautiful moment, it's a trick by Freddy. So it's heartbreaking. And I didn't even put two and two together that kind of forgot that her mother was an alcoholic in the first movie. So that kind of adds to the tragedy of watching her father then also fall down that same kind of trap. So yeah, those tears that she had were real.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like Andy, to your point, like it is like really heartbreaking to know that like you have this like unresolved essentially happen. To where like I mean she's fairly young still in this movie. Like Paige on the in the timeline, how old would you like guess she
She's
is here?
22. So they say in there, they say a grad school superstar. And so when you look at it, she's 22. She's just starting grad school. She just published her first paper, or she's about to publish her first paper. And so she had just graduated college. So
So
she's young. She's really young.
it's so 22, you've lost the love of your life, you've lost your father, you've lost your mother, and you've
All your
experienced
friends, your best
yeah,
friends since childhood, all murdered, and nobody's still taking you serious.
yeah, and here you have this like this tragedy that besteals you. And I think one of the things that's really like inspiring about Nancy as a character is to realize that like life is gonna kick you and it's gonna throw you every rock it can. It's a matter of standing strong and realizing that you are stronger than the circumstances that are around you.
For
Yeah, and
sure.
I've I don't know, Paige, how you feel about just as a fan of the franchise, like how it feels to have Nancy die in this, because I know a lot of times in horror franchises, having a legacy character or main character die kind of could hurt the fans. But my kind of 2 cents of it all was, even though she dies, I find it a little beautiful in one way, because in the whole first film, she's learning about not giving into fear. And in this movie, she never does give into fear. And it's actually the trick from Freddy is like light and love, and it's her giving herself to that for the first time that is what gets her. So Freddy kind of has to resort to kind of cheap tricks because she's learned to overcome him by all his traditional methods of fear. So even though it's a death, I find it like in a weird way triumphant, because it was almost he had to like play dirty to get her because she had gotten too strong for his regular old moves. And by giving into love and dying, it doesn't seem as tragic as if she was just afraid and died.
Right. Like she didn't die in fear.
Yes,
That's if you
which is what
believe
Freddy
she
wants.
died. That's if you believe she died. Do you think she died?
I mean, do you mean in the essence of her kind of
So
like her essence going into
the beautiful dream. So in the
yeah,
original script,
yes.
in Wes's
Mhm.
original script, she knows that it's Freddy. She knows that it's not her dad. And that's this
Uh-huh.
is my only gripe with Dream Warriors is the ending. And because Nancy wouldn't fall for that. Nancy wouldn't fall for the Freddy trick. She's smart enough. Like you said, she's been through all this. She knows what he's doing. And so they changed that. That was the one thing that that as the fandom couldn't get behind, that like we can't believe they would change that. Originally, she and Freddie go at it. He comes down and he's this, dressed as Don, and he's like that. And Nancy plays into it. And she's like, "Oh, Daddy." And then she kills him. She realizes who it is. And she's like, "You're not gonna get me this time." And they go down in a blaze of glory, like a blaze of like warrior's flame. And Kristen says to her, "I'm going to dream you into the beautiful dream forever and ever, so you'll never have to die." And she does. The film actually continues on. So at the end of the film, her and Neil are having lunch, and he says, "Oh, I gotta go. I've got to go. I've got that date." And she goes, "Are you seeing her again tonight? Please tell her I said hello." And so she dreamed Nancy into this beautiful dream. And so at the end of what we have, Nancy goes down fighting, and I love your theory on it and your thought on it, because that kind of changes my opinion a little bit on it, of like the love and light aspect. That's what she goes down in. And in the end, Kristen says, "I'm going to dream you into a beautiful dream forever and ever." And then at the end of the film, the light turns on in the house. And so a lot of people
Ah.
think that it's Nancy. And in the canon comic books, which were commissioned by New Line, Nancy is in the Beautiful Dream, and she's the gatekeeper. She's the guardian. And so I don't mind that Nancy died in this one. When I was a kid, I used to be really sad about it, and as a young adult, I'd joke around like, "Okay, we're turning the film off. It's over," when they say it's over, and like, "All right, it's
Yeah.
over," just for like fun. But I actually, from a filmmaker perspective and a story driven perspective, I don't mind it, because it is that thought that she's in the beautiful dream, continuing that on throughout the rest of the series. So when you look at part 4, when Kristen dies and she passes her powers on to Nancy, she's also passes her powers on to Alice. She's also passing the power of Nancy onto Alice. And so Alice becomes this strong, ultimate final girl who is still alive to this day. Alice is the only final girl in the Nightmare series that lived up until Freddy's daughter. We don't know that one. But so Alice is still alive. And she has that essence of Nancy. So I don't mind that she dies in it either, as a fandom, but it's because I think she's in the beautiful dream guarding the gate.
Cool. I like that a lot. I had no idea about the original script and the original ending. I would have liked to see that as well, but I feel like what I did
Yeah.
was just trying to make sense of what we had on the
But
screen.
I love
But
that. I
yeah,
love that you
I
made
loved
sense
it.
of it, because you changed my opinion on it a little bit. So
Oh,
I
fantastic.
love the view of
And that's why I love talking about this stuff, because even though I've been watching this since I was 14, you can still come away with something new.
Yeah, podcasting is great.
Shout out to podcasting.
Yeah, shout out to podcasting. Yeah, it yeah, I don't really have anything to add to. I think you guys spoke it really well. The one thing I will say, Andy, to your point, she might die, but she gets reincarnated as Heather Langenkamp, comes back. So
Yeah. And I remember as watching these for the first time, I would rent them from my local library for free whenever they had them in stock. And I got them mostly in order. I think I saw like 1 or 2 of them out of order. But when I got the New Nightmare and I didn't know what it was and saw that she was back, I remember just being elated. You just being like, I saw her die. I know it's it's not her, but this is fantastic. Like, just as a fan, you don't expect it, you know. And I
I
saw
think as a
Scream
kid
before
you
New
don't.
Nightmare.
Oh,
Yeah,
did
so
you?
yeah,
you
so Scream was one of my first horror movies. I was born 1990, so I was 7 years old over my brother's shoulder watching Scream, when it came out.
love it.
So I appreciated it a lot, New Nightmare, when I finally saw it.
I love that, because New Nightmare is just starting to get love. Like, I'd say the past few years, a lot of people have picked up on it. I saw it when I was 9 years old in theaters, or eight or 9. I can't remember how old I was. but my dad took me. It was after my grandpa had passed away. It was around my birthday. And it was a packed theater, and I was the only kid in there. And I was like, this, because I was like watching my hero kick Freddy's ass like one last time. And I think as a kid, you don't really understand the story or the plot of it, like because you just see Nancy, and so you think it's Nancy up there, and you don't really get it.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people now are. Um, I think a lot of people look at film differently now because of social media and the rise of like the internet, and how a lot of like magazines have gone online and gone in the digital space, and I feel like it gives a lot of people freedom to openly talk and be like very well spoken about it and write all these articles and stuff. And I think that a couple years ago, some people in the horror space, in the horror world, were like re-reviewing Wes Craven's New Nightmare and kind of doing like a like justice for Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And I love that a lot of people now are seeing it through a new lens and seeing it through an eye of it just being the best. It's just the most beautiful film. Like it really is. It's such a great film.
Yeah, I go to bat. I remember when I first started getting into conventions and the subject of Nightmare on Elm Street would come up, they'd be like, "What's your favorite Freddy movie?" And it's New Nightmare every time. And I always had to like feel like I had to defend it. I'm like, "Look, man, like I just it's great. Like it's well written, it's scary. It brings this concept of like bringing him into like an alternative reality into our reality. Like it's meta, it's it's just witty, and it's one of the first films I remember seeing in horror where um you know you actually have a kid that can like act,
Mhm.
and Miko Hughes does a great job in that movie.
And you also, this is the first Freddy film that you see him go after a child. Like you
Yes.
get to see what he
Yeah.
does with a child. It's not him killing him or scraping his skin. He's psychologically torturing this child. Like it's the first film. You see him do this with teenagers. You see him play with them, and look at Joey in part 3 in Dream Warriors. He's playing with like the sexuality of it, because he's clearly gone through puberty. And you look at like part 2 and he's taunting Jesse and playing with him in a sexual way. And it's like that's what you think of when you think of Freddy. You think of the Predator, all of that. But then when you actually see him go after a child, like what he's really doing and what he puts this kid through, they have to check him into a mental hospital. Like literally, like what the films happen, because he is torturing this child. He's stalking him, grabbing his feet in the night, creating a world underneath his blankets that's supposed to be the safe space for him. And hauntingly, those voices of the you're afraid to go into your closet because who's in your closet. It's 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 such a smart, great way to showcase who Freddy really is and how dark and sinister he is, because he's not trying to get Dylan, he's just trying to get through Dylan. And the only way to do that is to create this ultimate fear that then gives him the strength and allows that genie to come out of the bottle. It's just such a great film.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you're right. Like it's one of the reasons that I always like refer to Jason Lives as the best Friday the 13th film, is because you're actually getting to see what Jason is going to be like in a camp full of campers and counselors. They actually like utilize that setting really well. And I think for the first time in the franchise, and probably the only time in the franchise, really, you kind of get to see it. Like the remake, like hints at it, but I think it's a lot more like like studied and focused with Dylan in New Nightmare.
Oh yeah. And then Miko Hughes on top of that, like his acting is just like he is the kid of the 90s, if you want, like in the film. Like I wish his career would have exploded more because of that. How I feel like New Nightmare didn't get the love and respect that it truly deserved from all of that aspect. If you even look at it as Heather, it's her best performance. Like it is
Absolutely.
everybody in that film. David Newsom, who plays her husband Chase. Like it's just such a great acted film that in general doesn't get the respect that it deserves. But in the horror industry, I love that it's growing so fast that we're having these conversations around it.
Maybe when you come back to Kickstart, we talk New Nightmare.
Yeah, I can talk New Nightmare all day.
Nice.
The last thing I want to talk about, if there's anything else you guys want to talk about, but um, I know from my experiences growing up and struggling with depression, but also having friends that struggle with depression and suicide. The line that Kristen's mother uses, she's just looking for attention. That line is like really heartbreaking and like hits really close to home to me because I think a lot of people in our ignorance or mental health signs or signs of depression or suicide or self-mutilation, like we don't have this tendency to understand the situation, so we just kind of chop it up to the individual is simply just looking for attention. And there is an actual like there's truth to that. Because if the person might not understand how to articulate in words what they're going through, but also at the same time, even if someone says that they are going to kill themselves, whether you think it's serious or not, you should still sit and listen to that person because words go a long way.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
if someone was to say they're just looking for attention, my response is then pay attention. If they're just looking for
Exactly.
attention, then pay attention. What is it that they want your attention from? Um, I can't go into too much detail about it because I want people to see it in the doc. But I had a situation like that as well with somebody who was supposed to be important and look out for me in that type of situation in my school setting. And I'm very thankful that my parents ultimately are who they are because when that happened with me, my parents fought for me in a sense, saying like, no, she's not just looking for attention. This is the real issue. This is what's going on. And I think when people do that, I think ultimately they just don't care. I think that that's what it comes down to is they're in their own world and they've got their own stuff going on and they can't quite possibly grasp what anyone else is going through, no matter what they're going through, whether it be good, bad, happy, whatever. And I think that it sometimes can be a personality flaw of them, or they just have so much going on, they're not paying attention. But I think if you're going to make the statement of this person just wants attention, then the follow up always must be then give them the attention. Like, what does it harm if you're saving somebody's life? No matter how many times somebody tells you they're going to kill themselves, listen to them because that one time that they don't tell you could be that one time you said, I wish they would have told me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head when you said that a lot of times the people are in their own world and don't care. And to relate it back to Kristen's mom in this movie, I actually rewatched a segment from Never Sleep Again for this movie, and the actress who played her said that she played the character with her own backstory, that she kind of was one of the lead parents leading the charge against Freddy and burned him alive, and was this whole lifestyle of men and drinking and ignoring her daughter. It was just years and years of her not coping with it because she didn't have the mental capacity to deal with it, with what she did or the repercussions. So yeah, she can't even see her daughter's pain because she has no idea how to deal with her own. And I just
Right.
think that's a really prevalent thing that we see a lot where yeah.
It's why mental health and talking about mental health is so important. I I'm very open with my mental health struggles, even to this day. I'm still very open with talking about my depression. I was diagnosed at 12 years old with clinical depression, and I'm very open about talking about it. And I sometimes question when I am talking about it if people are sick of hearing about it, or if it comes off as like, oh, there she goes. She's talking about her depression again, or she's talking about why she hasn't responded to people again, or why and that's my own depression. That's my own inner stuff that I'm working on because nobody's really thinking that. They're just, seeing whatever. But I'm very open with talking about mental health, because if it can save one person's life, or if one person can read that and see like, oh, she's going through that as well. Like, for all intents purposes, like, my life now is really great. I have an amazing husband. I've got a great career. I've got a great house. I've got on paper what everything looks great. And so the outside world would see that and think, oh, what problems does she really have? Right. And so for me, when I express certain things of thoughts or just bouts of depression, I do it because I want people to know that, like, every walk of life, everybody goes through shit. Everybody's going through shit. And if we don't talk about it and get it out there and say these things, maybe somebody else is in a similar situation to me, that they could come to me and say, like, hey, this is what helped me, helped me get out of this episode. And I think that it is very important to have these conversations and to continue to talk about these things, because you're just continuing to open, expand people's minds. Or somebody who doesn't necessarily understand depression can be hearing these conversations and stuff and be like, oh, I never thought of that. I never thought somebody might be going through this. I might need to check in on some people. In our documentary, there is my story. There's an incident that happens when I'm 12 years old. And after our premiere, one of my good friends who is in the documentary comes up to me and says, I had no clue that that's what you went through. And my daughter's the same age, and she's going through a lot of this right now. And I'm going home and talking to her. Like, this has made me want to have a conversation with her, to check in with her. And I think that that is why it's so important to talk about this, is because this talking about mental health in this documentary is now making him going home and having a conversation and checking in with his 12-year-old daughter.
Yeah, and I think film has such is a powerful medium to have those conversations, and podcasting has become a pro prolific platform to have them as well. And our parent company, Victims and Villains, when we started this, it started out me and my wife just going to conventions and just having conversations. Like, one of the things that I love to talk to people about is, like, tell me what you love, like, tell me what makes you you. And you'd hear people be like, oh, I'm really into Batman, I'm really into Star Wars, I love anime, I love video games. What got you into that stuff? And you'd hear stories like, oh, well, I lost my parents, or I struggled with depression or self-mutilation, or if I get bullied, or I have a bad home life. And those reasons just kind of go on and on, but they're all effects on negative effects on your mental health. So you're looking for essentially escapism. And the Fredheads of course explores that escapism through the guise of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. But you're looking around, if we were like, why is there not a platform where people are having it? And so I think we're in a space now in 2023 where it feels a little bit more comfortable to where we can have things. But I think that, like, I've seen this movie countless times, and I feel like looking at it through the mental health lens, like, has made me, like, just see this film in a completely different light, even especially after having this conversation.
Okay, I love that. That is the way that most, like, of us, especially in the documentary, that's how we've always seen it. And so we've always felt like the world sees Freddy Krueger as this funny, quippy slasher, and he is that. That doesn't discredit any of that. He very much is that. But when you yourself are going through what these characters have gone through, and you know that it's depression, and you know that it's anxiety, and you know it's all of the mental healthness and everything that you've said, I think that's why we see these films that way. And so I love that, like, conversations like this are kind of expanding minds. And that's the whole goal of our documentary. The whole goal of our documentary is not just to change how people view A Nightmare on Elm Street, but to change how people view horror as a whole. Because it's not just A Nightmare on Elm Street that's this way. That's the beauty of it, is that the Halloween fans, the Halloween fandom, they feel that way about their films. They feel that way about the Halloween films. It's their coping for them. It's their their crutch, you know, their security blanket. And as a whole, as a human race, we think that a lot of people can relate to Fred Hedge just in general because you could like Disney. This could be, you know, you could be just as obsessed with Disney, and Disney's your coping mechanism and your coping tool that helps you get through mental health, or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or you know, or it, or whatever. I'm looking at my wall of like movies. What do I have on here? I think that you know, like I think that like I think that's the thing. I think so for us, that's our goal, is that we hope that we could show through the lens of this is what these films are. Truthfully, these are what.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us on this episode of A Bit Scazing, but you guys can catch Paige's film, Fredheads, the documentary, exclusively making its Virginia premiere at our Horrific Hope Film Festival, April 14th and 15th, exclusively at the Alamo Draft House in Winchester, Virginia. Tickets are now online. We'll provide a link in the show notes below. And shout out to our sponsors for that film festival: Convicted Printing, You Have to Watch This Podcast, Fierce Literature, Horror Pack, our anonymous donor, and Diabolical DVD. All links for all of their stuff are also in the show notes below. But Andy, where can people follow you online?
You guys can follow me with my other podcast, Love What I Love, at LWIL Podcast. We're on Instagram and Facebook and wherever you can find your podcasts that you like.
And they sometimes make TikToks with their dog.
We do sometimes make TikToks with their dog. Sometimes we make TikToks with their dog. Yes.
Lots of following.
Paige, where can people follow you online?
So you guys can find me on TikTok and Instagram at The Final Girl 13, and so it's a GURL instead of IRL. It's like girl. So The Final Girl 13 at TikTok and Instagram. And then Fredheads is fredheads-the-documentary.
It's just Fredheads across the board. Fun fact, I didn't know I followed Deidre on TikTok. She came up on my FYP page, and I was like, wait, it was yesterday after I finished watching the movie. I was like, went to her page and I was like, oh, this is Deidre from Fredheads, Small World.
Yeah, Deandra. She has two.
Yeah.
She's got a Regina Mills cosplay that like is crazy. She looks identical to Lana Parrilla. Like people think she looks like Heather Langenkamp, and then you put her next to Lana Parrilla, and they're like twins. So she's got a Regina Mills one, but then she's got her sassy sledgehammer, her horror.
Yeah, that's the one I follow.
Yeah.
So, well, you guys could follow me. I'm on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia, and I'm also on TikTok making the occasional videos. It's Gent Ghostface, GENT. You guys can follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and wherever you guys get your podcasts. And make sure you guys subscribe to Abyss Gazing. Now, we have our own feed. Hit that subscribe button, rate and review. And until next time, remember that the longer that you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.